Imagine a world where the gods are at war, where betrayal runs through the veins of the divine family, and where the future of the universe depends on a single battle. Zeus, the god of thunder, was once just a rejected son, hidden from the grasp of his own father, Cronos, until the day he rose to challenge the order of the universe and destroy the Titans. How did he do this? And why did this battle change everything you know about the gods and the fate of the world? Get ready to discover the secret story of Zeus's rise and how he defeated the Titans to rule the universe. A journey of betrayals, immense powers, and battles that shaped history. If you think you know everything about Greek mythology, think again, because what you're about to see will surprise you. Stick around to uncover the secrets of this war and how the gods' fate was ultimately sealed. Let's go. The true battle is about to begin. In the beginning, there was nothing but chaos, a dark, formless void where everything and nothing blended together. There was no sky, earth, or sea, only an endless abyss. But gradually, something began to change. From chaos came Gaia, the earth, strong and generous, able to give life to everything that rested upon it. Soon above her appeared Uranus, the sky, vast and starry, covering Gaia like a protective cloak. Together, Gaia and Uranus gave birth to immense and powerful beings. The Titans, immortal and grand, the Cyclopes, giants with a single flaming eye, and the Hecatoncheires, colossal creatures with 100 arms and 50 heads, capable of crushing mountains with a single blow. But Uranus did not look favorably upon all his children. Upon seeing the Hecatoncheires and the Cyclopes, he felt disgust and fear. He didn't want these creatures to roam freely in the world. So without mercy, he locked them away in Tartarus, a dark abyss so deep that anyone who fell into it would take 9 days and 9 nights to reach the bottom. Gaia, who loved all her children, was saddened by this injustice. But her sadness soon turned to anger. How could she allow Uranus to imprison her own creation? Her heart burned with indignation, and a plan began to form in her mind. She needed someone strong enough to challenge Uranus and free her children. The revolt began to grow, and the fate of the world was about to change forever. Gaia's anger grew each day. She felt the pain of her children trapped in Tartarus and could not accept Uranus's cruelty. Determined to act, she traveled the world in search of one of her children brave enough to challenge him. She gathered the Titans and revealed her plan. Someone had to overthrow Uranus and take power, but the Titans hesitated. To challenge their father was unthinkable. Fear of Uranus's wrath paralyzed them. However, one stepped forward. His name was Cronos, the cleverest and most ambitious of the Titans. He felt no love or loyalty toward Uranus, only a desire for power. "If no one else dares to face him, then I will," Cronos said, with a cold gleam in his eyes. Gaia smiled, satisfied. From her depths, she created a sickle of adamant, sharper than anything that had ever existed before. She gave the weapon to Cronos and explained what he must do. When night fell, Uranus descended from the heavens to rest upon Gaia, as he did every night. It was then that Cronos attacked. With a precise and brutal strike, he castrated his own father, separating him from his power forever. Uranus howled in pain, his scream echoed through the universe, and his blood poured out over the earth and sea. From this fury born of suffering, the terrible Furies emerged, vengeful spirits, and the beautiful nymphs of the sea. Defeated, Uranus withdrew forever, becoming only the distant sky that watches all, but no longer interferes with the world. Before disappearing, he cast one last prophecy. "Just as you betrayed me, Cronos, you too will be betrayed by your own son." Cronos ignored his father's words and took the throne. Now he ruled the world. But in the back of his mind, the prophecy remained, like a shadow that would never disappear. Cronos was now lord of the world. Sitting on his throne, he ruled firmly and cunningly, imposing his will upon all. To ensure no one would challenge him, he freed his Titan brothers and placed them by his side. However, the Cyclopes and Hecatonchires remained imprisoned in Tartarus. He feared their power and preferred to keep them forgotten in the dark depths of the earth. Time passed, and Cronos took his sister Rhea, a powerful and majestic Titaness, as his wife. Together, they had children who promised to be even greater than the Titans themselves. But despite his victory, Cronos could not forget Uranus's prophecy. Fear began to grow within him. What if one of his children actually turned against him, just as he had done to his father? Consumed by paranoia, Cronos decided he would never allow that to happen. Every time Rhea gave birth, he wasted no time. He took the baby in his hands and swallowed it whole, imprisoning it inside himself. One by one, his children disappeared: Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. Rhea watched helplessly, her heart broken, but she could do nothing against her husband's power. When she became pregnant again, her anguish reached its peak. She could no longer bear to see her children devoured. With tears in her eyes, she sought Gaia, her mother, for help. "He can't take another. I need to save him," she begged. Gaia, who already knew Cronos's fate, smiled with wisdom. Then she whispered a plan into Rhea's ear. On the day of the birth, Rhea went to the island of Crete where, in a secret cave, she gave birth to a boy with bright eyes, Zeus. Her heart ached, for she knew she had to hide him. With trembling hands, she took a stone, wrapped it in cloth, and returned to the palace. Cronos, as always, demanded the baby without even looking. Rhea, holding her breath, handed him the wrapped stone as though it were her child. Without suspecting anything, the Titan opened his mouth and swallowed it in one go, convinced he had once again avoided his fate. Meanwhile, in the cave of Crete, the young Zeus cried in the arms of the nymphs who would care for him. Above all, he was alive. And one day, he would return to challenge the father who never knew of his existence. Hidden in a cave in the mountains of Crete, Zeus grew away from Cronos's eyes. Rhea entrusted her son to the care of the nymphs, Amalthea and Adrastea, who raised him as their own. To ensure Cronos would never discover the baby, Gaia and Rhea took precautions. At the top of the cave, the warrior Curetes would strike their spears against their shields whenever Zeus cried, muffling any sound that could betray his presence. From a young age, Zeus showed a unique energy. He was clever, agile, and curious, always exploring every corner of the cave. His diet was special. He drank the milk of the goat Amalthea, which made him strong and healthy, and delighted in the golden honey of the sacred bees of the forest. Each day, his body grew stronger, his eyes sparkled with intelligence, and a flame of determination burned inside him. One day, while playing near the entrance of the cave, he found a broken horn from Amalthea. Without knowing, when he touched it, he awakened a magical power. That object became the cornucopia, a horn of plenty that never emptied, always filled with the finest fruits and foods. It was the first sign that he was destined for something grand. Time passed, and Zeus was no longer a helpless boy. He became a vigorous young man, taller and stronger than any mortal could dream. Deep in his heart, he felt that he did not belong to that hiding place. Something called him beyond the cave, to a much greater destiny. It was then that one day, the mysterious goddess Metis, the embodiment of wisdom and prudence, appeared before him. Her gaze was sharp, and her words carried deep knowledge about what was to come. "Zeus, your time is coming. You are the son of Rhea and heir to something much greater than you imagine. But first, you must learn the truth about your father and your brothers." And so, for the first time, Zeus heard about Cronos and the cruelty he had committed against his children. A burning flame of indignation took hold of him. "I need to stop him," he declared firmly. Metis smiled. "For that, you will need a plan, and I can help you." The wheel of destiny began to turn, and the young Zeus took his first steps toward the confrontation that would change the world forever. Zeus could no longer ignore the truth. Knowing that his father had devoured his own children fueled his fury. He felt he could not rest, while Cronos reigned unpunished, but attacking alone would be suicide. He needed intelligence, strategy, and above all, allies. Then Metis, the goddess of prudence and wisdom, appeared before him once again. Her penetrating gaze seemed to see beyond the present, anticipating every step of the future. "You know, you can't defeat Cronos with brute force alone, Zeus," she said, her voice serene but firm. "If you want to dethrone him, you need cunning." Zeus nodded. Deep down, he knew Metis was right. "Then teach me. Tell me what I need to do." The goddess smiled. "First, you must free your siblings. They are your true allies, the only ones who will share your cause with blood and soul. But for that, we need to deceive Cronos." Zeus furrowed his brow. How could he free siblings who were inside his father's own body? Metis approached and raised a small glass vial. Inside it, a golden liquid glowed, like the sun itself. "This potion will make him return everything he swallowed. But for it to work, you need to find a way to make him drink it." Zeus grabbed the vial and held it tightly. The first step was before him. If he could get Cronos to drink the potion, his siblings would be free, and together they could start their rebellion. Now he just had to figure out how to reach the Titan without raising suspicion. Zeus could no longer ignore the truth. Knowing that his father had devoured his own children fueled his fury. He felt he could not rest while Cronos reigned unpunished, but attacking alone would be suicide. He needed intelligence, strategy, and above all, allies. Then Metis, the goddess of prudence and wisdom, appeared before him once again. Her penetrating gaze seemed to see beyond the present, anticipating every step of the future. "You know you can't defeat Cronos with brute force alone, Zeus," she said, her voice serene but firm. "If you want to dethrone him, you need cunning." Zeus nodded. Deep down, he knew Metis was right. "Then teach me. Tell me what I need to do." The goddess smiled. "First, you must free your siblings. They are your true allies, the only ones who will share your cause with blood and soul. But for that, we need to deceive Cronos." Zeus furrowed his brow. How could he free siblings who were inside his father's own body? Metis approached and raised a small glass vial. Inside it, a golden liquid glowed like the sun itself. "This potion will make him return everything he swallowed. But for it to work, you need to find a way to make him drink it." Zeus grabbed the vial and held it tightly. The first step was before him. If he could get Cronos to drink the potion, his siblings would be free, and together they could start their rebellion. Now, he just had to figure out how to reach the Titan. Without raising suspicion, Zeus held the vial of golden potion while his mind worked quickly. He knew he couldn't just challenge Cronos openly. The Titan was too powerful, and without allies, Zeus wouldn't stand a chance. He needed a plan to infiltrate his father's realm and make him drink the liquid without suspicion. "How will I get to Cronos without being recognized?" he asked. "Metis." The goddess smiled slyly. "He doesn't know your face, Zeus. You've spent your life hidden. If you're careful, you can enter the palace without raising suspicion." This made sense to Zeus. Cronos believed all his children were still inside his stomach. He would never suspect one of them was alive, let alone planning his downfall. "Then I need to get close to him, earn his trust," Zeus murmured, reflecting. "Exactly," Metis replied, "but it won't be easy. Cronos trusts no one, not even the Titans who serve him. It will require patience." Zeus nodded. He was willing to do whatever it took. He studied the customs of Cronos' kingdom, learned about his court and servants, and finally found an opportunity. The Titan always kept servants around, bringing him food and drink. If Zeus could infiltrate among them, he could get close without raising suspicion. Métis then handed him simple clothes, identical to those worn by the palace servants. With his strong build and determined look, Zeus looked like an ordinary peasant. With the potion safely hidden, he set off toward his father's kingdom. The world's fate was about to change, and Zeus was ready to take the first step in overthrowing the ruler who had long oppressed his own children. Dressed as a simple servant, Zeus walked through Cronos' magnificent palace without being noticed. The Titan's realm was imposing, made of giant columns carved from golden stone. The main hall was always filled with feasts, music, and wine. But despite the grandeur, the atmosphere was heavy, laden with fear. The Titans serving Cronos never dared to defy him, for they knew what he was capable of. Zeus watched his father from a distance. Cronos sat on his throne, immense and powerful, with a golden crown on his head. His eyes were cold, always suspicious, as if expecting betrayal at any moment. He ate and drank without concern, for he believed he had destroyed any threat to his reign. As Zeus approached, he bowed his head respectfully, as the other servants, who did. "Bring me more wine," Cronos commanded, without even looking at him. Zeus held tightly to the amphora he carried. The potion was mixed with the wine, just as Métis had planned. He remained calm as he poured the red liquid into the Titan's golden cup and extended it with steady hands. Cronos grabbed the cup without hesitation and drank it in one gulp. Zeus held his breath. His heart pounded in his chest. Would it work? Would Cronos notice anything strange? For a moment, nothing happened. Cronos remained seated, looking at the other Titans around him. But then, a strange sound escaped his throat. The Titan placed his hand on his stomach, his expression twisting in discomfort. A deep groan echoed through the hall. Cronos staggered in his throne, bringing his hand to his mouth, and suddenly he began to vomit. The ground shook as something huge emerged from within him. First, a figure covered in mucus fell to the ground. It was Hestia, the eldest of his siblings. Then, one by one, the other gods were freed. Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. They were whole, fully formed, as if they had never been swallowed. And as they regained their senses, their gazes met Zeus's. They didn't need to ask. They knew it was him who had freed them. Cronos' fate was sealed. The war was about to begin. The grand hall of Cronos' palace was taken by chaos. The Titan still writhed, groaning as his children emerged from within him. The impact of the potion had been overwhelming, and Zeus watched closely as his siblings regained consciousness, breathing for the first time outside their father's body. Hestia, the first to be freed, trembled, trying to understand where she was. Demeter and Hera looked around, confused, but soon realized what had happened. Hades fell to his knees, gasping, while Poseidon stood up with clenched fists, feeling a growing fury inside him, and then their eyes met Zeus's. Who are you?" Hera asked, her voice hoarse, as if she hadn't used it in centuries. Zeus stepped forward, his chest swelling with pride. "I am your brother, the only one who escaped from Cronos, and the only one who has returned to free you." The silence that followed was thick. The newly freed gods exchanged glances, still processing the truth. But before they could respond, a roar of fury cut through the air. "Traitors!" Cronos rose from his throne, his face contorted with hatred. The entire palace trembled with his rage, cracks spreading through the golden columns, and the Titans around him recoiled, fearing the explosion of the king's wrath. Zeus didn't hesitate. He turned to his siblings and extended his hand. "Come with me. We need to flee now." Hades was the first to move. He grabbed Zeus's hand and stood up. Then Poseidon helped Demeter, while Hera and Hestia stumbled toward them. The group united into one force, but Cronos was already moving to strike them. "You will never escape!" roared the Titan, his hand closing into a colossal fist. It was then that Zeus raised his palm and for the first time channeled the power burning within him. A thunderous boom filled the hall, and a blast of energy hit Cronos in the chest, causing him to stagger. The gods seized the opportunity. They ran through the palace, knocking everything in their path. Titan guards tried to stop their escape, but they were caught off guard by the strength of the newly freed siblings. Poseidon struck the ground with his feet, creating cracks that made the enemies stumble, while Hades used his speed to confuse them. Finally, they crossed the gates and vanished into the night. Gaia's starry sky welcomed them as if it recognized its true heirs. They were free, and now, together, they would prepare their vengeance against Cronos. After escaping from Cronos' palace, Zeus and his brothers took refuge in Gaia's highest mountains. Although they were free from their father's control, they were still far from safe. Cronos, with his overwhelming power and control over the Titans, would not surrender easily. He not only wanted to destroy his children, but also to maintain dominion over the entire world. Zeus knew the battle would be difficult. He had freed his brothers, but to defeat Cronos and his followers, he would need more than just the newly freed gods. He needed powerful forces that could match the Titans, and for that, he would have to turn to unexpected allies. He then remembered the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires, those whom his father, Cronos, had imprisoned in Tartarus for being so powerful and threatening. What few knew was that the Cyclopes, with their 3 eyes, were master forgers and could create incredibly powerful weapons. The Hecatoncheires, with their 100 hands, possessed strength capable of destroying even the most imposing enemies. Zeus then made a plan. He knew he had to descend into Tartarus, where the 2 groups were imprisoned, and free them. The journey would be risky, but it was undoubtedly crucial for their victory. The journey to Tartarus was feared even by the gods themselves, a dark and deep place where the most terrible beings were confined. The wind seemed to whisper to them, and the cave's chains echoed with the screams of those who had been defeated. But Zeus, determined, knew there was no other choice. He approached his brothers, who were gathered, paying attention to his proposal. To defeat Cronos, we need more power. We need to free the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires. With their weapons and their strength, we will be unstoppable. Hades, always gloomy, looked at Zeus with a smile that mixed confidence and suspicion. "You're right, brother, but descending into Tartarus won't be easy. Cronos himself must be watching." "The place," Zeus nodded, aware of the risk, "but we have the advantage of surprise. Let's go now, before he realizes what we're planning." And so, the gods set off for Tartarus. The journey was long and arduous, but they finally arrived at the abyss separating them from the prisoners. They approached the stone walls surrounding Tartarus, and with a wave of pure energy, Zeus did the impossible. He destroyed the magical chains imprisoning the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires. The giants emerged from the depths, their eyes shining with fury and freedom. "We're free!" roared the leader of the Cyclopes, Brontes, with a voice that made the rocks tremble. The Hecatoncheires, with their 100 hands, raised their fists to the sky, as if saluting the freedom that had been stolen from them so long. Ego Zeus smiled, his heart pounding. Now, with new allies, victory seemed closer than ever. Cronos' reign was about to end, and the war against the Titans was beginning to unfold with overwhelming force. With the alliance formed, the trust between Zeus and his new allies grew quickly. The Cyclopes, led by Brontes, were especially grateful for their freedom. It didn't take long for Zeus to convince them that their liberation was not just a personal favor, but a promise of revenge against Cronos, the tyrant who had imprisoned them for so long. Their gratitude came at a price. The Cyclopes were ready to repay what they had received. In the forge of their ancient smithy, where the heat seemed to melt even the soul, Brontes and his brothers, Steropes and Arges, began to work with their powerful hands. They, masters of metal and magic, were known for their ability to forge weapons of great power, weapons capable of shaking the very heavens and earth. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades gathered with the Cyclopes, who began to work intensely. Using the rarest and most powerful metals from Gaia, the forge roared, and the hammers struck with a force that seemed to echo throughout Olympus. First, Brontes forged for Zeus the lightning bolt, a gleaming artifact that shone with an energy that seemed to emanate from the sky itself. When Zeus held it for the first time, he felt an immense force run through his body. The sensation was like the sky itself had been compressed into his hand. The lightning bolt was not just a weapon. It was a symbol of absolute power, capable of destroying any enemy. For Poseidon, the Cyclopes created the trident, a weapon with 3 sharp prongs capable of splitting the seas. Poseidon felt the power of the ocean merging with his own strength when he held it, as if the seas had chosen the trident as their true ruler. With the trident in hand, Poseidon could summon storms, control the waters, and even open fissures in the ocean's depths. Finally, the Cyclopes forged for Hades the helm of invisibility, a piece of armor as black as the night. When he put it on, Hades became invisible, able to move without being seen by any living being or god. The helm not only concealed him from view, but also connected him to the realm of the dead, increasing his power over spirits and shadows. With these powerful weapons in hand, Zeus and his brothers were more ready than ever to challenge Cronos and the Titans. The battle that lay ahead would not be just a matter of physical strength, but of strategy, intelligence, and the use of their newly acquired powers. Now, more than ever, victory seemed within reach for the new gods. The Titans might be strong, but nothing could stop the power of lightning, the seas and shadows, when united for a greater cause. Zeus, with the lightning bolt shining in his hands, looked at his brothers with a confident smile. Now let's go to war. Cronos' end is near. With the mighty gifts of the Cyclopes in hand, Zeus and his brothers began to gather their armies. The battle against Cronos and his followers would not be a simple matter of brute strength. It would require strategy, organization, and courage. They needed allies, warriors willing to fight for freedom, and that meant uniting both the gods and the beings who had been oppressed by Cronos. Zeus, with his lightning bolt, began to call upon those who opposed the tyrant. He knew he needed more than just the Olympian gods. To defeat Cronos, he would need the support of the beings who, like him, had suffered under his father's rule. He went to meet the Titans who still opposed Cronos' dominion. Some, like Prometheus and Epimetheus, had remained neutral during Cronos' reign, but were now willing to ally with the new gods, recognizing that the old order was about to fall. Zeus also turned to the giants, who, despite being generally feared and misunderstood, harbored a deep hatred for Cronos, who had kept them under his tyranny for centuries. To ensure the army had the necessary strength, Zeus made an alliance with these giants, promising them lands and powers in a new world where freedom would be guaranteed. While Zeus and his brothers organized the gods' army and their allies, Poseidon turned to the seas. He summoned the sea creatures, including the Leviathans, monstrous and powerful beings that ruled the ocean depths, and the Tritons, half-human, half-fish beings who served as his loyal warriors. With Poseidon's strength, the waters were prepared to swallow any enemy who dared to cross their path. In turn, Hades went to the underworld, where the dead awaited their final moments. With the power of the Helm of Invisibility, he was able to communicate with the souls of the fallen heroes and the damned, offering them a chance for redemption by fighting alongside the Olympian gods against Cronos. The specters of the underworld, led by Hades, would make a difference on the battlefield, invoking fear and death among the Titans. the Hecatoncheires, with their 100 hands and unmatched strength, also joined the gods' army, ready to crush anything in their path. Brontes, the leader of the Cyclopes, took charge of the forge, creating more powerful weapons to ensure that each warrior had the best armament for the fight. With all these warriors gathered and organized under Zeus's leadership, the army was ready. Confidence spread among the gods and their allies. Everyone knew the war against Cronos and the Titans would be fierce. But they were united by a single purpose: freedom, the end of tyranny, and the birth of a new world. Zeus climbed to the top of a mountain and, with his lightning flashing intensely, called upon the winds of the sky. "Today, we mark the beginning of the end for Cronos." His voice echoed across Gaia. "Our army is unbeatable. Let's show the world the power of the new gods." The armies gathered, ready to march. The battlefield was being prepared, and the future of the universe hung by a thread. The war was about to begin, and no one knew how it would end, but everyone was ready to fight until the end. The earth trembled beneath the army's feet, and the sky darkened with storm clouds. The battle ahead was inevitable, and the fate of the universe was about to be decided. Cronos, knowing his children were preparing to face him, did not wait. He knew the battle would be a fight for survival, and he needed to crush any hope of victory the gods and their allies might have had. So, the Titans marched, imposing and furious, to the front lines. The Titans, loyal to Cronos, giants of brute strength and endurance, were armed to the teeth, ready to destroy anyone who opposed. Their king, Atlas, the strongest among them, led the charge, his immense body moving with the speed of thunder. With him were other fierce titans, like Mnemosyne, the titan of memory, and Iapetus, who had been responsible for forging the destruction of Olympus in the past. On the other side, Zeus's army positioned themselves confidently. Zeus, with his lightning, stood at the center of the formation, surrounded by Poseidon with his trident and Hades, who moved in invisibility, disappearing at every moment to strike where his enemies least expected. The Cyclopes, with the lightning bolts specially forged for the battle, were ready to bombard the Titans from afar, while the Hecatoncheires prepared to throw huge rocks, obliterating any structure and crushing any enemy in their path. The tension in the air was palpable. The battlefield, a vast plain, seemed to be divided between the old and the new. The sun hid behind dark clouds, and the winds howled with the force of the inevitable. It was Zeus who made the first move. With an abrupt gesture, he raised his lightning to the sky, and a wave of electrical energy surged through the clouds, lighting up the entire plain with a blinding light. The thunderous roar was heard by all, a warning that the war had begun. The first attacks were launched. Zeus's lightning sliced through the air and struck the enemy lines, while Poseidon summoned a tsunami of murky waters that engulfed part of the Titans' forces. But Cronos did not yield. With a terrifying roar, he raised the titanic hammer, a massive weapon forged to destroy anything in its path. He charged toward the center of the enemy army, determined to crush everything in his way. The smaller Titans advanced with the same fury, their colossal forms crushing the ground beneath their feet. Iapetus and Hyperion, with their immense bodies, charged at the gods with overwhelming force. The sound of their hands striking the ground was like thunder, and each blow shattered the trees and rocks around them. But the gods were prepared. Hades, with his helm of invisibility, infiltrated the ranks of the Titans and, with surprise, struck at their weak points. His attacks were quick and silent, and the Titans could barely react before seeing their allies fall. Poseidon, with his trident, called upon the seas to rise against the Titans, and the waves swept the giants away, forcing them to retreat. The battlefield was consumed by violence and chaos. Lightning, waves, and colossal stones collided, creating a storm of destruction. That seemed endless. But at the heart of the battle, an even more epic confrontation was about to take place. Zeus, with his blazing lightning, looked directly at Cronos, his father, who charged at him, wielding his hammer. The world around them seemed to disappear as the two stared each other down. This was the moment Zeus had waited for from the beginning. The moment when he would finally face the being who had cursed him and now threatened to destroy the hope of all. The war had begun, but the fate of everyone was about to be sealed in the clash between father and son, between Cronos and Zeus. As the Titans advanced with all their brute strength, the battle became increasingly chaotic and bloody. But Zeus knew that sheer force would not be enough to defeat his enemies. To defeat Cronos, more than just physical power was needed. It would require cunning, intelligence, and an unbeatable strategy. Zeus looked at his brothers and allies, all immersed in the fierce battle against the Titans. He knew that to ensure victory, he would need to use his warriors' strength intelligently. Poseidon, with his control over the waters, and Hades, with his mastery over the shadows, were key pieces, but their abilities needed to be used in a coordinated way. The first move came from Poseidon. Knowing that the Titans were formidable in physical combat, the god of the seas decided to use the terrain to his advantage. He called the waters to form massive waves that crashed against the enemy armies, causing the front lines of the Titans to lose strength and retreat. The violent waves tore giants from their feet and swept them away, breaking the Titans' formation and opening the way for subsequent attacks. Meanwhile, Hades, invisible beneath the mantle of his helm, moved among the Titans like a shadow, striking with surprise. He could not be seen, but his presence was felt in the deadly blows he dealt to Cronos' ranks. The Titans' forces were being undermined from within, destabilized by Hades' rapid and deadly strikes. His attacks were not only physical but psychological, as he knew how to sow fear in the minds of the Titans. With his ability to disappear at any moment, Zeus, seeing the success of his brothers, began to take action. He knew the final confrontation with Cronos was inevitable, but until that happened, the priority was to weaken the Titans' combat power. With a command, he had the Cyclopes, with their forged lightning bolts, attack the Titans' most powerful creatures like Atlas and Hyperion, creating a deadly distraction. As the Titans' defenses were broken, Zeus seized the opportunity to strike a decisive blow. He observed the battle around him and knew the right moment was approaching. His sharp mind was always thinking about how to destabilize the enemy, and now was the time to focus on his primary threat, Cronos. As the smaller Titans fell, Cronos himself, furious and blind with rage, searched for a single target, Zeus. The Titan, imposing and indestructible, advanced like a storm, delivering blows with his massive hammer. Each of his strikes made the ground tremble, and the fury of his power seemed limitless. However, Zeus knew that no matter how strong his father was, Cronos lacked his children's cunning. Rage blinded him, and that was his weakness. The battlefield was now a game of chess between fathers and sons, where the pieces moved with calculated precision. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades were not just fighting, but also manipulating the movements of the Titans, guiding the battle toward the result they desired. As the battle intensified, the Titans began to realize they were being led into a trap. Cronos' army, despite its immense size, was slowly being dismantled. Raw strength was being countered by the strategic intelligence of the gods. Zeus, with his lightning bolt shining brightly, looked at his brothers and, without a word, signaled that it was time to prepare for the next step, the direct confrontation with Cronos. The battle of strength had been won. Now, it was time to defeat the king of the Titans and put an end to the reign of terror he had imposed on the world. The battle was nearing its climax, and all signs pointed to the fact that the power of the Olympian gods, combined with smart strategy, would be enough to land a fatal blow to Cronos and his army. The war between the Olympian gods and the Titans had entered its 10th year, and the fight showed no signs of slowing down. The sky had become a constant storm field, the seas were turbulent, and the land was marked with the scars of battle. Massive blows of brute force collided with clever attacks, and every battlefield seemed like an arena of destruction. The Titan army, although at a numerical disadvantage, was still formidable, composed of some of the most powerful beings in the universe. However, the Olympian gods, with their strategic intelligence and extraordinary abilities, were beginning to show their superiority. For years, the conflict dragged on with no clear victor. Both sides suffered heavy losses, and the balance of the war swayed between moments of hope and despair. The Hecatonchires, with their 100 hands and immense strength, continued to bombard the Titans, hurling enormous stones and destruction against the enemies. But even they were being overwhelmed by the immense resistance of Atlas and other Titan warriors. The battle, though grand, had reached a point of stagnation, with neither side fully dominating. Zeus knew he could not continue in this stalemate. His brothers, Poseidon and Hades, were resolute in their attacks, but the resistance of the Titans was unbeatable. The Cyclopes, who had forged the gods' powerful weapons, continued to provide support, but their strength was also beginning to weaken. It was then that Zeus, with his strategic vision, realized the need for something more. The war would not be won by brute strength, but by the unity of the gods and their allies. Prometheus and Epimetheus, who had remained neutral until then, saw that Cronos' victory was becoming an increasingly remote possibility. Recognizing that the Titans were losing the war, they approached the gods, offering their skills and intelligence to ensure victory. With Prometheus' support, the god of intelligence and cunning, the gods began to devise a more detailed and definitive plan. He suggested attacking the Titans' weak points, those still united but whose strength was already being eroded by the gods' resistance. Prometheus knew that a decisive victory could not be achieved through physical power alone, but rather by a precise strike to their weaknesses. The Titan army began to crumble from within. Some started to question Cronos' leadership, as the promises of eternal power and domination over the universe no longer seemed feasible. Doubt spread like an invisible disease, and many Titans began to hesitate, fearing for the future. Iapetus, one of Cronos' most loyal followers, was the first to falter. He knew that victory was becoming more and more unlikely, and began to question his brother's leadership. As the war raged on, the gods realized that the key to victory would be the total union of their forces. Zeus, with his lightning, Poseidon, with the seas, and Hades, with the underworld, were stronger than ever. But now, with the reinforcements from Prometheus and Epimetheus, and the joint efforts of the Cyclopes and Hecatonchires, the chances of victory became real. The Titans, weakened by the loss of allies and the doubts eating away at their hearts, began to lose ground. Every battle that followed seemed like another defeat for the ancient rulers. The 10-year battle was finally reaching its climax, and the Olympian gods were about to achieve the victory they had longed for. The war was about to be decided once and for all, and the result of the titanic struggle was nearing. Cronos' reign was nearing its end, and the gods knew the decisive moment was about to happen. The battle's climax was approaching, and the smaller Titans, those still fighting alongside Cronos, began to realize that the tide of war was irreversibly changing. Despite the fact that the great Titans like Atlas, Hyperion, and Cronos still retained their strength and resistance, the smaller Titans were being defeated one by one, crushed by the willpower and clever strategy of the Olympian gods. Zeus's forces, now fully united and strengthened by Prometheus's intelligence and the devastating power of the weapons forged by the Cyclopes, were becoming unstoppable. The ground that once seemed dominated by the Titans' brutality was now being conquered with well-coordinated and precise strikes. Every smaller Titan that fell increased the despair among Cronos' allies. Prometheus, who had initially kept his distance, now fought alongside the Olympian gods, using his intelligence to manipulate the battlefield. He knew that the fall of the smaller Titans was not just a strategic victory, but a psychological breaking point. Fear spread among the Titans as they watched their comrades fall before enemies they had once underestimated. Epimetheus, his brother, who had always been more impulsive and impetuous, began to gather the Titans who were hesitating, those who had doubts in their hearts. In a strategic twist, Epimetheus helped instigate the desertion of some of the smaller Titans, creating an even greater rift in Cronos' defenses. With every new deserter, the morale of his allies weakened. One of the first to fall was Mnemosyne, the Titan of memory, who had been by Cronos' side from the beginning. She, with her vast wisdom and knowledge, had been one of the most formidable opponents to the gods, but in the end, she could not withstand the weight of the prolonged battle. With a combined blow from Zeus and Poseidon, she was defeated. Her colossal body crashed to the ground with a thud, sending a shockwave that reverberated across the battlefield. Another Titan to succumb was Iapetus, who had been the pillar of resistance among the smaller Titans. When he began to realize that defeat was inevitable, his faith in Cronos wavered. He was attacked by Hades in a stealthy assault, using his helmet of invisibility to deliver a fatal blow. Iapetus fell, defeated by the strength and cunning of the Olympian gods. As the smaller Titans fell, the Cyclopes kept launching powerful bolts of lightning, striking strategic points of the enemy defenses, while the Hecatoncheires, with their immense strength, destroyed any remaining resistance. The battlefield was littered with bodies and debris, and Cronos' forces seemed to be crushed by an unstoppable enemy. Atlas, the greatest of the Titans, watched with growing despair. He knew that victory was slipping from his grasp. He, who had stood firm by Cronos' side until the last moment, saw his allies fall and his brothers deserting. His massive body was tired, and his strength, though immense, was no longer enough to resist the pressure of the Olympian gods. Cronos, despite his titanic strength, was also beginning to waver, and Atlas knew that the battle was lost. The smaller Titans, in their fall, left a trail of destruction, but despair also spread. The last resistances were crumbling, and the gods were about to deliver the final blow to ensure victory and Cronos' downfall. The end of the Titanomachy was within reach, and the Olympian gods, after 10 years of relentless fighting, were about to overthrow the last of the great obstacles standing in their way to world domination. The future of the earth, the seas, and the underworld was about to be shaped by the hands of Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. The battlefield was in ruins. The forces of the Titans were nearly destroyed, but there was still an imposing figure, sowing terror and resistance: Cronos, the Titan leader. His colossal body was covered in scars and bloodstains, but his fury remained uncontrollable. He knew this would be the decisive battle, and he was ready to fight until the end. The Olympian gods had won over most of their allies, the lesser Titans were defeated, and victory seemed within reach. But for Cronos' reign to truly be over, only one thing needed to happen: the direct confrontation between Zeus and Cronos. The fight between father and son would be the climax of a war that had lasted 10 years and changed the fate of the universe. Zeus, with lightning flashing in his hand, advanced toward Cronos, who wielded a massive sickle, the same one he had once used to castrate his own father, Uranus, and seize power. Their duel would not be just physical, it would be a battle of wills, of opposing destinies. Furious, Cronos made the first move. With a roar, he lifted his sickle and swung it toward Zeus with tremendous force, making the ground tremble beneath the feet of the gods and titans still locked in battle. The blow was powerful, and it seemed like Zeus wouldn't be able to avoid the sharp blade. But Zeus was quick and agile, and with a swift move, he dodged the fatal strike, using his divine reflexes to evade. With the speed of lightning, Zeus countered, hurling a bolt directly into Cronos' chest. The explosion of energy lit up the sky, as if the sun itself had been thrown at the Titan. Cronos screamed in pain but didn't falter. His skin was burned, but his endurance seemed endless. He wouldn't allow a mere lightning strike to defeat him. Zeus, however, knew that brute strength alone wouldn't win the battle. He had learned from the mistakes of Uranus and Cronos. True power lay in strategy and using the enemy against themselves. So he retreated, allowing Cronos to follow, making him believe that the might of the Titan's sickle would be enough to crush him. But this was part of Zeus's plan. When Cronos charged, Zeus led him into a trap. He raised his hand to his other weapon, his cunning. Using the power of the lightning, Zeus not only attacked Cronos, but also distorted the space-time around him, creating an explosion of light and chaos that momentarily blinded the Titan. Seizing this moment of confusion, Zeus used his lightning to land a precise strike, hitting Cronos directly in the heart. His own father. The earth shook with the force of the blow, and a wave of energy surged across the battlefield, knocking all the surrounding titans to the ground. Cronos, now weakened, staggered back. The sickle fell from his hands, and he knelt like a fallen giant, looking into the eyes of his son. The fury of his youth and the rage of all past generations had finally been defeated. Zeus, with a relentless look, raised his lightning once again, this time with the intention to end Cronos' reign once and for all. A final lightning bolt flashed brightly, and Cronos was consumed by his own destruction. The Titan leader fell to the ground with a thunderous crash, his body aflame and his strength shattered. Silence took over the battlefield. The war was over. Cronos, the great Titan who had ruled the universe with an iron fist, was now defeated, and with him, the era of the Titans came to an end. Zeus had fulfilled his promise to avenge himself, his mother Rhea, and his siblings. The victory was decisive, but the pain of the battle still lingered in the air. With Cronos' last breath, the age of the Titans finally fell, and the reign of the Olympian gods was about to begin. The world would change forever. With Cronos' fall, the battle seemed to finally have reached its end. However, there was still one figure who would not easily surrender. Atlas, the strongest and most loyal of the Titans, was among the last to resist. Seeing the fallen leader of the Titans and his defeated companions, his fury grew even more. He knew the fight couldn't end without him making one last attempt to turn the tide. With his immense stature and colossal strength, Atlas charged to face the Olympian gods, determined to avenge his people and preserve the legacy of the Titans. With a massive rock in each hand, he attacked with fury, ripping enormous chunks from the earth and hurling them as giant projectiles, targeting the gods with the precision of a legendary archer. Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, and the others, now with victory in sight, joined forces to face the last standing giant. Zeus, the quickest, was the first to move. He fired a lightning bolt, but Atlas blocked it with a swift movement, dodging and counterattacking with a punch that made the earth tremble. But Zeus knew he couldn't defeat Atlas with brute strength. He would need more cunning, just as he had done with Cronos. While the gods kept Atlas occupied, Zeus and his brothers used their abilities more strategically. Poseidon, with his trident, caused tremors in the ground, forcing Atlas to balance himself and opening gaps in his attacks. Hades, using the Helm of Invisibility, appeared behind Atlas at a crucial moment and struck his back, creating a distraction that allowed Zeus to attack with greater force. But Atlas wouldn't give in, and his strength seemed unyielding. It was then that Zeus made the final move. He knew that Atlas, with all his power, couldn't be defeated easily. But the gods had an advantage that Atlas didn't have: unity and strategy. And most importantly, Zeus had one last card to play: the Titans' punishment, reserved for the strongest among them. With one final charge, Zeus lunged at Atlas, not with a physical attack, but with a beam of energy that immobilized him for a brief moment. At that instant, Zeus called on Prometheus and Epimetheus to use their intelligence to create a trap for Atlas, a magical prison that would use the god's powers against him. Prometheus, with his wisdom, understood the need for such a device and helped form a magical net that began to envelop Atlas's body. Atlas's great resistance finally gave way as he was wrapped in the magical energy of the god's prison. With his arms immobilized and his body completely trapped, he was defeated not by strength, but by the unity and cunning of the gods. Zeus looked at Atlas with a resolute gaze, knowing the battle was lost for the Titans. But the consequence of that defeat would be even more cruel. Atlas, the unbeatable Titan, was sentenced to eternal punishment. He was forced to carry the heavens on his shoulders for the rest of eternity, a task no one else could bear. A punishment that reflected his unparalleled resistance and strength, but also his failure to understand that the battle wasn't just about strength, but about unity and intelligence. With Atlas's fall, the battlefield fell silent. There was no more resistance, no more enemies to face. The victory belonged to the Olympian gods. The Titans, except for those few who had deserted, were defeated, and the gods' dominion over the universe was assured. The path was clear for the Olympian gods to finally take Mount Olympus and establish their authority over the skies, seas, and earth. However, while the victory seemed definitive, there was a sense that the cost of the war and the choices made would be something the gods would have to carry forever. The victory was complete, but the echoes of the Titanomachy would reverberate through eternity. With the last resistance broken, the world fell silent. The roar of battle had ceased, and the Olympian gods gathered around the defeated bodies of the Titans. The war that had lasted 10 long years was now at its end, but the fate of the defeated Titans still needed to be decided. The power of the gods was consolidated, but how to deal with the defeated Titans, those who hadn't surrendered and had fought until the very last moment, was not a simple matter. The fallen Titans, including giants like Iapetus, Hyperion, and Mnemosyne, were captured and immobilized, but the question of what to do with them still lingered. Tartarus, a dark and isolated place at the bottom of the world, was the only safe option to keep these powerful enemies out of the sight of mortals. The prison there was not just a physical one, but an eternal condemnation, and the decision to send the Titans there was not made lightly. Zeus, as the leader of the Olympian gods, knew he had to ensure that the Titans could never return to Earth and threaten the order he and his brothers had established. Tartarus was a deep, inescapable abyss, a place that, while not destroyed, was completely dominated by darkness and emptiness. The Titans would be imprisoned in its depths, where their only company would be the Hecatoncheires, who were tasked with guarding them. But what weighed most on the hearts of the Olympian gods was the nature of the punishment. They did not want only to defeat the Titans, but to ensure that no Titan, no matter how strong, could escape their prison. Hades, the darkest of the brothers, suggested a punishment as cruel as Tartarus itself, a hopeless prison watched over by eternal forces where no Titan could ever break free. To this end, he summoned the Hecatoncheires, the giants with 100 arms and 50 heads, known for their unparalleled strength. They would be responsible for keeping the Titans within their prison, and Tartarus would be sealed with an impenetrable portal. No Titan could ever escape, no matter how strong or intelligent. However, Prometheus and Epimetheus, the Titans who had remained relatively neutral during the war, were among the few to be treated differently. Although Prometheus had helped the gods, his loyalty to Zeus was not unquestionable, but he could not be punished in the same way as the other Titans. His wisdom and foresight were indispensable, so Zeus decided to spare him from being sent to Tartarus. Although his punishment would be severe, Prometheus, who had once defied Zeus by bringing fire to humanity, was sentenced to a bitter fate. He would be chained to a remote mountain, where an eagle would devour his liver, which would regenerate constantly, creating eternal suffering. His punishment was a reflection of his crime of defying the gods to benefit mortals. Epimetheus, his brother, who had always been more impulsive and less careful, was left to live among mortals. His punishment would not be so much physical as it would be psychological. He would live in a world where he would always try to fix the mistakes of the past, but without the wisdom necessary to do so, a fate of perpetual frustration and regret. Meanwhile, the rest of the defeated Titans were taken to Tartarus, where the darkness would consume them. There would be no more chances for redemption or escape. They would be forgotten by the gods and mortals, their power silenced forever in the depths of the abyss. The Hecatonchires would watch over the prison with constant vigilance, ensuring that no Titan would dare challenge the gods again. With the Titans imprisoned and order restored in the universe, the Olympian gods finally turned to the construction of the new world. But the cost of the war still weighed on their hearts. The legacy of the Titans, with all their greatness and strength, was now immortalized in the legends, but their fate was sealed. They had been defeated and imprisoned, and the reign of the Olympian gods, with Zeus in command, was just beginning. The world of mortals, with its gods, would now be governed under the new rules of Olympus. And so, the rule of the Titans came to an end. But the echo of their existence, the memory of their strength and their flaws, would remain in the stories and in the very fabric of the world, as the gods tried to ensure that such a devastating struggle would never occur again. Balance at last seemed restored. With the defeat of the Titans and the destruction of the resistance, the Olympian gods began to consolidate their power. The war had been hard fought, and many lives had been lost, but now the field was clear for the world to begin a new era under the leadership of the gods. Zeus, now victorious and indisputable in his dominion over the sky and the earth, gathered his brothers Poseidon, Hades, and all the other gods who had allied with the cause, so they could together establish the new cosmic order. They knew they could no longer live as they had before. Mount Olympus, the highest peak in Greece, would be the new home of the gods, a symbol of their supremacy over the world. It was there, at the top of the mountains, that they would rule the skies, the sea, and the land, away from mortals, but always watching and influencing their lives. Olympus was not just a home, but a place where the laws of the universe would be made, and where peace and order would reign. Zeus, as the leader, took the task of establishing the foundations of the new reign. Poseidon, with his trident, would rule the seas and oceans, a vast domain full of mysteries. Hades, despite his displeasure, was given the underworld, the realm of the dead, which would now be the place where the souls of mortals would find their final destination. Though Hades felt betrayed for not being gifted the same grandeur as Zeus and Poseidon, he knew that fate was already sealed, and nothing could change the division of the realms. With these domains established, the Olympian gods began to attend to smaller matters. They created the sky, where the stars and winds would be controlled by Aeolus, the lord of the winds. Hera, Zeus's wife, was tasked with overseeing marriages and the protection of families, creating a moral order for mortals to follow. Athena, Zeus's daughter, became the goddess of wisdom and strategy. while Apollo, her twin brother, was named. The god of the sun and music, Artemis, Apollo's sister, would rule the forests and the animals. Thus, from the foundation of Olympus, each god received their part in the governance of the new cosmos, and the roles were set in a way that ensured harmony and balance in the world. Olympus, a mystical land, was accessible only to the gods, but its presence stretched over all the earth and sky, governing invisibly but omnipresently. Mortals could not see the gods, but they could feel their presence in every natural phenomenon, in every lightning strike, in the storms that formed at sea, or in the changes of the seasons. With Olympus established, the gods began to dedicate themselves to the creation of mankind as part of their new order. Prometheus, despite his cruel punishment, had not been completely removed from the fate of mortals. He was still, in some way, linked to their creation. He taught humans the secrets of fire, the art of writing, culture, and science, bringing with it a new era of knowledge and evolution for humanity. He became an ambiguous figure to mortals, both admired for his altruism and feared for his defiance of the gods. Zeus, though victorious, knew his mission was not complete. He had defeated the Titans and established a new order, but challenges to his authority were far from over. Every day, new heroes emerged, new creatures were created, and the world was in constant change. The relationships between the gods and mortals, the alliances among the gods themselves, and even the balance of power within Olympus would always be susceptible to challenges. But for now, Olympus was the heart of the universe, and its foundation meant more than just a palace for the gods. It was the symbol of victory, order, and stability. And with peace established in the sky, on the earth, and in the sea, the world began to rise again, ready for a new era of challenges, myths, and legends that would emerge in the lands of mortals under the watchful eyes of the gods of Olympus. Victory had been achieved, but the game of the gods would never end. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades now had to deal with the complexities of reign and the consequences of their choices. But one thing was clear: Olympus would rule over the world until a new cycle began, and perhaps a new war. After the founding of Mount Olympus and the definitive victory over the Titans, Zeus and his brothers gathered to divide the power of the new world. Olympus was established as the center of the universe, but there was still the question of how they would govern the vast territories and realms outside of their homes. This division was crucial because, despite being united in victory, each god's ambitions and desires were strong, and peace could easily be threatened by disputes among them. Zeus, as the leader, knew that the harmony in the new cosmos depended on how this division would be made. Poseidon desired the seas with their uncontrollable power and his connection to the waters. Hades, on the other hand, had the underworld in mind, the realm of the dead, where he ruled over the souls of mortals. And Zeus, being the most powerful, coveted the skies, not only as a domain of rule, but also as a source of absolute power. With all the gods present, a precise solution was discussed. To avoid the division leading to disputes among them, it was decided that the best way to divide the world would be by drawing lots. Zeus himself, as the arbiter of the decision, proposed that each of them would draw a share of power from the three main realms of the universe: the sky, the sea, and the underworld. It was a tense and decisive moment because the balance of the realms depended on the common sense of the three gods. What followed was a distribution that, though fair, would leave some lasting marks on the hearts of the gods. Zeus, the most powerful, received dominion over the sky. He would rule the winds, storms, and stars, but also be the lord of thunder and lightning, symbols of his supreme authority. The sky, with its vastness and uncontrollable power, was his natural throne. He would be the guardian of order, the final judge of all conflicts, and the sovereign who would maintain peace between the gods and mortals. Poseidon, always desiring more, took the sea as his realm. The seas, with their mysterious depths and powerful creatures, would be his domain. His trident, forged by the Cyclops, would grant him absolute power over the waters and the maritime forces. However, despite his strength, Poseidon also carried the burden of loneliness and uncertainty, as the seas were vast and treacherous. In his domain, he would rule over sea monsters, storms, and risky voyages. Finally, Hades was assigned the underworld. This realm, dark and isolated, would be his eternal domain. Unlike the other two realms, the underworld was the place where the souls of the dead would rest, judged by their actions in life. Hades, though reluctant and uncomfortable with his part of the agreement, knew that the underworld was crucial to the balance of everything. He would rule over the dead, but also deal with the immutable nature of death and fate. His reign would be marked by mystery, solitude, and inevitability. The division of the realms seemed fair, but for Hades there was a deep pain in being relegated to the underworld. While his domain was vast and essential, the fact that he didn't receive the sky or the seas as his brothers did left him bitter. Hades had always believed that, as the deepest and most feared god, he deserved more than just ruling the shadows of existence. But he knew the decision was made, and somehow he needed to accept what was given to him. However, that resentment against his brothers would forever stay in his heart. With the realms divided, the gods finally found a balance that seemed promising. However, each of them now had a mission: to keep their realms under control, deal with mortals, and, of course, ensure that the promises made during the war were kept. The consequences of the division would bring new responsibilities, new alliances, and perhaps new challenges. In the end, what seemed like a victory and a peaceful solution began to sow the seeds of new tensions. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades now ruled independently, but they could not forget that they were bound by fate. Disputes over power, family tensions, and encounters with mortals would test the strength of this new order and, eventually, bring new conflicts to the surface. Olympus was complete, but the true test of peace was still to come. Although the division of the domains had been made seemingly fairly, Hades, the lord of the underworld, could not shake the weight of bitterness. He had received the realm of souls, a vast domain but dark and solitary. Compared to the realms of Zeus and Poseidon, the underworld seemed to be the lesser prize, not because of its lack of importance, but due to its misunderstood nature and its being feared by all. From the beginning, Hades knew his domain was necessary. After all, the souls of the dead needed a place to rest. The underworld was the point of transition between life and death, where spirits separated from their bodies and faced the judgment of their actions in life. However, for Hades, the underworld represented something much darker: loneliness, the inevitability of death, and being seen as a god who ruled over fear and the end. Unlike Zeus, who ruled the skies with thunder and absolute power, or Poseidon, who reigned over the seas with their vast expanse and mystical creatures, Hades found himself surrounded by darkness. The underworld was a place of silence and mystery, inhabited only by souls, shadows, and creatures that fed on death. The souls that arrived there rarely returned, and the few interactions Hades had with mortals were limited to inevitable situations like moments of death. For him, ruling the underworld was not a blessing but a burden. Hades's resentment grew as he watched the other gods revel in their prosperous and grand realms. Zeus, with his dominion over the skies, was revered by all, and his deeds were sung in hymns. Poseidon, with control of the seas, was celebrated as a god who controlled the raw power and beauty of the waters. But Hades, the god of the underworld, was often forgotten or worse, feared for his connection to death. He felt sidelined, ignored, and the emptiness of his realm only intensified that feeling. It wasn't that he wanted to rule the skies or the seas, but the fact that he wasn't recognized as his brothers were was a wound hard to heal. He knew that the underworld was essential for the balance of the world, but that wasn't enough to calm the resentment consuming him. Interactions between Hades and his brothers became rarer, and whenever they did happen, the atmosphere was tense. Zeus, in his role as leader, felt the growing animosity and tried in his own way to ease the situation, but Hades shut himself off more and more in his shadowy realm. Poseidon, while respecting Hades, also preferred to keep his distance, focusing on his own expansion of power in the seas. Hades' resentment wasn't limited to the gods of Olympus. Mortals also feared him. They saw him as the god of the end, the lord of lost souls. They offered prayers and sacrifices to please the gods of Olympus, but never to Hades. His temples were scarce and distant, hidden in caves or lonely places. Even when souls came to his realm, it wasn't a visit that was desired, but a journey with no return. As the years passed, Hades' bitterness grew deeper and more bitter. He knew that despite everything, he had an indispensable role in the world's balance. Mortals needed him because death was an inevitable part of life, but the other gods continued to ignore him, never acknowledging the weight of his responsibility. Thus Hades delved further into his domain, surrounded by souls and shadows. He accepted the underworld as his prison, and at the same time as his reign, where he could rule with absolute authority, even if alone. However, this isolation also made him vulnerable. The resentment wasn't just a passing emotion, but a powerful force that eventually would have consequences not only for him, but for all the other gods. Hades began to wonder, how long would he endure this solitude and disregard? Would his brothers notice the suffering behind his cold and distant facade? Or was he destined to live in oblivion, ruling a realm of the dead, eternally alone? The winds of change began to blow through the underworld, and Hades, despite his refusal to seek recognition, knew that one day his pain could explode into something much more devastating for him and for all who lived on Mount Olympus. With the division of the realms complete and the Olympian gods firmly established in their domains, the world seemed to finally find a new balance. However, to ensure that the chaos of the old Titan War would not repeat itself, it was necessary to create a new set of rules governing the workings of the cosmos, both among the gods and the mortals. These decrees were crucial to prevent further internal disputes among the gods themselves and to maintain order in the universe. Zeus, as the leader of the gods, took on the responsibility of establishing these new norms. Though he was the lord of the sky and held absolute power over what happened in the world, he knew that a balance between forces was critical. The rules he enforced would not only control the mortals, but also ensure that the gods fulfilled their duties without interfering with one another. One of the main new rules was that the gods could no longer directly intervene in the affairs of mortals unless it was necessary to maintain the order of the world. The Olympian gods had witnessed the chaos that ensued when their own interests had overshadowed the needs of mortals and the balance of the universe. The war between the Titans and the gods had been a reflection of the failure of moderation and the consequences of excessive power. Therefore, Zeus decreed that direct interventions in human affairs would be limited and, if they occurred, would need to be carried out with more caution and responsibility. However, there was an important exception. The divinity of oracles, represented by Apollo and other gods of destiny, would allow predictions about the future to continue, as the fate of mortals was, in some way, intrinsically tied to the will of the gods. Nevertheless, these predictions would need to be treated with respect and wisdom, for human curiosity about the future had always been an uncontrollable force capable of triggering unpredictable events. Poseidon, Lord of the Seas, accepted that the oceans should not be used for conquest or destruction without cause. His power over the waters should be used to maintain the harmony of the sea and its creatures. Though tempting, he could no longer use his seas for selfish or personal reasons, something that was also reflected in the storms he so loved to control. He had to remember that the sea was both a source of life and destruction, and that his whims could be fatal. For Hades, the main rule of the new cosmos was that the underworld would be kept as a realm of judgment and rest for the souls of the dead, but it should never be used as a battlefield or a place to fight for power. While dominion over death was necessary for balance, he could not allow the dead to interfere with the affairs of the living world. The spirits were there to rest, not to interfere in lives still being lived. Hades reluctantly accepted this condition, knowing that the underworld was essential for the balance of life and death, but also feeling that his options for action had been further limited by these new rules. Furthermore, Zeus imposed the idea that there would be no more wars among the gods, at least not without a good reason. Though tensions, envy, and rivalries existed among them, the chaos of the old Titan battles should be avoided at all costs. However, there was something difficult to control. Human emotions were unpredictable, and this included anger and jealousy among the gods. It was almost impossible for Zeus to guarantee that this wouldn't happen again, but he established rules that required any conflict to be resolved peacefully or, if necessary, by a divine tribunal formed by neutral gods like Athena and Apollo. The new rules also emphasized the importance of honoring ancient traditions, such as sacrifices to the gods and respecting the natural laws of the cosmos. Mortals would need to understand that their fates were tied to respect for the deities and the forces of nature, and that any violation could result in severe punishments. To this end, the gods created a network of temples and priests responsible for guiding mortals in following these new divine laws. Those who opposed the new rules of the universe would be treated as examples. The revenge of the gods was not something to be taken lightly. When mortals broke a pact or disrespected the gods, the punishment could be severe and eternal. The examples of punishment were clear and aimed to teach everyone that the balance of the world should never be altered. However, not all mortals accepted these rules willingly. Some questioned the divine authorities, challenging the gods and seeking ways to avoid their decrees. This would, in time, give rise to new heroes and legends, and perhaps new conflicts between mortals and the gods themselves. With the new rules implemented, the balance of the cosmos seemed, for now, restored. The gods would live on Mount Olympus, the mortals would be governed by the natural laws, and peace would reign, or so it seemed. But deep down, everyone knew that the balance could easily be shattered. After all, what were the new rules but the beginning of a new era where new adventures, passions, and challenges would emerge at every turn? The cosmos had been reordered, but as always, time and the choices of gods and mortals would continue. To test the new norms, Zeus's victory over the Titans was more than just a triumph of power. It marked the birth of a new era, the era of the Olympian gods, where the rules of the cosmos would now be governed by those on Mount Olympus. The fight against the Titans, with its immense destruction and suffering, had left scars on the universe, but also created a legacy of strength, wisdom, and justice. The war that once seemed like a desperate struggle for survival had transformed into the foundation of the new order. And, in some way, that war had been inevitable. for the rise of a new generation of gods would become essential for the balance of the world. Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, and the other Olympian gods, now immortalized in their power and dominion, knew that the legacy of the Titan War was not limited to the victory over their enemies. The victory meant responsibility. They had defeated a generation of deities, but now they had to govern with wisdom to prevent the same chaos from repeating. They had to be the protectors of a new order, not the oppressors of a new generation of gods or mortals. For Zeus, the greatest challenge would be unification. Though he was the leader, he knew that the sense of distance and resentment, especially from Hades, would never completely disappear. The loneliness of ruling the underworld, along with his bitterness toward the other gods, could become a weak point in the future. However, Zeus would try to reconcile the tension between his brothers, seeking ways to maintain harmony between all the realms they controlled. His role as a leader meant not only having power over the skies, but also the ability to prevent old conflicts from resurfacing. He knew that the mistake of his parents, Uranus and Gaia, in holding power without considering everyone's needs, could not be repeated. Poseidon, lord of the seas, upon observing the vastness of his waters, knew that his power could easily become a threat, both to the gods and to mortals. But at the same time, he felt a deep pride in his maritime majesty, and his desire to govern the seas wisely became his greatest motivation. However, he understood the need to maintain a balance between his own desires and the well-being of the world, something he now saw more clearly after the war. Hades, for his part, would remain in the underworld, ruling over the souls of the dead. But the solitude that had consumed him in the past was beginning to be filled with a new sense of purpose. He knew that, although his domain was the most isolated and gloomy, he couldn't act out of resentment forever. Hades was beginning to accept that his mission was, in part, vital to the order of the cosmos. Death was not something to be feared, but an essential part of existence. The underworld was not just a place of suffering, but also of rest and renewal. Reconciliation with his brothers, though difficult, would be key to finding more meaning in his own existence. As the Olympian gods established themselves in their domains, the legacy of the Titan War continued to be passed down by future generations. Mortals, now under the protection of the gods, began to venerate the new divine forces. Temples were erected in honor of the Olympian gods, and myths about the heroic deeds of the gods and their children spread throughout the world. The stories of Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, Hera, Demeter, Aphrodite, and many others echoed through time, teaching lessons of courage, justice, and even the inevitability of fate. However, as with all things divine and human, the gods' legacy would constantly be tested. The hunger for power would never disappear, and attempts to challenge the divine order would become a constant throughout history. The world was now under the dominion of the Olympian gods, but mortals would continue to fight for their place, creating their own legends, their own challenges, and in some way keeping alive the flame of curiosity and the desire for freedom. What the Titan War had clearly taught was that brute strength alone was not enough. Balance, wisdom, and above all, a deep understanding of fate and the consequences of each action taken were required. The gods had defeated the Titans, but now they were the guardians of cosmic balance. The legacy of the Titan War was not just a story of victories and defeats, but an eternal lesson about the cost of power, the weight of responsibility, and the eternal struggle between light and shadow. And so the cycle would continue. The gods would live, rule, and be challenged, while mortals sought their own destinies, gazing at the sky with the eyes of the gods always upon them. The era of the Olympian gods had begun, and the world, now, in a new cycle, awaited what would come next. And so ends the Grand Titan War, which shaped the future of both gods and mortals, bringing balance to the cosmos and starting a new era of challenges and victories. If you enjoyed this epic journey through the myths of Greek mythology, don't forget to hit the like button down below. Comment on what impressed you most about this story, and of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos on the legends that defined our world. Until next time, and may the Olympian gods protect your path.